State House studio in Montgomery. I'm Todd Stacy. Welcome to Capitol Journal. Wednesday is Committee Day in the Alabama Legislature, and today was a busy one. Committees are a key part of the legislative process where bills get vetted more thoroughly by lawmakers who specialize in particular policy areas. We'll start in the Senate General Fund Budget Committee, where the first action was taken on the state's spending plans for the next fiscal year. The committee passed an updated version of the general fund budget, which funds the range of non-education state agencies. The proposed budget totals $3.3 billion, about $65 million more than Governor Kay Ivey originally proposed. But otherwise, it is very close to the governor's budget. Some key line item differences include doubling to $50 million the allocation to debt service for the prison construction bond, increasing direct prison construction funding from $100 million to $150 million, an additional $9.4 million for the Department of Mental Health, and $18.5 million specifically set aside for staff funding at the Taylor Hardin Mental Health Facility in Tuscaloosa. There's an additional $5 million for the Alabama Port Authority for pier repairs, and in keeping with Ivey's original proposal, $20 million is included for a new State House parking deck. We are going to keep an eye on that last one. That proposed budget will now go to the full Senate. It will likely be next week before the Senate takes it up on the floor. Moving to the Senate Agriculture, Conservation, and Forestry Committee, which took up the issue of medical marijuana. It's been nearly 3 years since the state enacted the medical cannabis law, but the process has dragged out over a series of lawsuits from companies who weren't awarded licenses. Senator David Sessions brought Senate Bill 276 to spur the process along by increasing the number of licenses available to accommodate more companies.
We assess this market going into it, and then now you're going to dilute it. I mean, I don't know how many of you guys are in agriculture, but you don't want somebody to start killing your product halfway through the game after you sign a contract and done, especially on the cultivation side. We've all had to pay our $40,000 up front already, and we have no viable market in the future. Even with this fix, the courts are not going to fix that.
Been denied twice and finally awarded on the third try after giving a public presentation to the commission. They deemed us being worthy of being issued a license. We actually went through our proper inspections. We actually passed our inspection, and we're actually operating today to be able to provide medical cannabis to the patients of Alabama.
Expansion has been proven to be effective in some medical markets, but never before the patient's needs were established. The current licensees in year one are capable of producing enough finished goods products to sustain almost 100,000 patients already. Alabama will most likely not have that many patients for 3 to 4 years if we ever do.
Now, if we expand this to 15, I believe in the free market. I believe the best of the best are going to survive. I do believe that. I believe we have minority companies that can survive and thrive in this industry. And you were talking about it not being fair to open it back up. Probably it's not. You guys did a great job, especially the ones that got it all 3 times. My hat's off to you guys, especially the farmer. Did a great job. And I'm for you. And I think you'll survive, regardless of how many go into business.
No vote was taken on the bill as the meeting was only a public hearing, but a vote is expected when the committee meets again next week. Staying in the Senate, the Fiscal Responsibility and Economic Development Committee met today, and most of the discussion was about a bill that wasn't even on the agenda. Senate Bill 231 from Senator Arthur Orr seeks to limit the proliferation of unions by making any company that voluntarily recognizes a union ineligible for state incentive dollars. This is coming as major unionization efforts are taking place at Hyundai in Montgomery and Mercedes in Tuscaloosa. Several union members came to the meeting to speak in opposition to the bill.
Make the vote on organizing a union a secret ballot or secret vote, private vote, if you're going to receive state funds. So if you receive the state funds for incentives for a particular project, if there's an organizing effort, it needs to be by secret ballot.
Passing this law will send a strong message to private employers that indicates that both the legislature and the state of Alabama will protect businesses and their employees from any unwanted or heavy-handed tactics in internal elections.
If you are in favor of voting to be unionized, you can fill out a card stating that you are in favor to be unionized. That's it. It's not, and we keep saying it's public. You can fill out that card. Your co-workers, they don't need to know.
Moving to the House Homeland Security Committee, which debated controversial legislation on the issue of immigration. House Bill 376 from Representative Ernie Yarbrough would allow Alabama law enforcement agencies greater authority to enforce immigration laws when they come into contact with those in the country illegally. It's dubbed the Laken-Riley Act, named after the University of Georgia student who was killed by an illegal immigrant earlier this year.
Our nation's security and the lives of our people are at great risk because our federal government has largely abandoned their sworn duty to uphold and defend in regards to the southern border. And obviously nobody here needs to be told the condition of that. And in fact, we heard yesterday how much of our National Guard in Alabama has been sent to help along the southern border in regards to what amounts to, by all accounts, close to an invasion. In fact, just recently, the Mexican president, known as AMLO, has threatened to keep and increase illegal immigration across our southern border unless we give in to his political demands. Our federal government could prevent all this immediately if they would enforce the law and do their job. And so House Bill 376 empowers local law enforcement to participate in the enforcement of immigration laws in connection with the federal government in a way that will hopefully prevent another Laken-Riley situation from ever happening, and also help give a more formal structure to the detaining, tracking, and transmitting of illegal aliens to the proper authorities so that the documented transparency is in place for local law enforcement to also help highlight the severity of the issues, bring pressure to the federal government to do their job with us faithfully, and have another tool to help serve and protect our communities.
No action was taken on the bill, but a vote could come as soon as next week. Multiple workforce development bills were moving in committee today. One major bill was up in the House Economic Development and Tourism Committee. House Bill 344 from Representative Danny Garrett would realign the state's workforce development apparatus by ending duplication and streamlining services.
So this bill basically changes the structure of our current Labor Department and also changes some things within the Department of Commerce to establish a new cabinet position and rename the Alabama Department of Labor. So the first thing is that the Alabama Department of Labor would become the Alabama Department of Workforce. And the new cabinet position, the Secretary of Labor, would become the Secretary of Workforce. And the Workforce Secretary shall be responsible for making recommendations to the Governor and the Legislature on all workforce development initiatives in the state. This will be effective 10/1/24, but there's a period for implementation that will run until 10/1/25. So once this goes into effect, we'll have an 18-month period to make all this effective.
That bill was approved and now goes to the full House. House Bill 373 from Representative Kelvin Lawrence establishes career pathways to encourage Alabama students to pursue trades and align instruction to suit their career paths.
So I'm one that's very supportive of pathways and creating pathways not for just those that are going to four-year institutions, and I think we should have pathways for them too. Like we have in our specialty school, whether it's the engineering school or whether it's the math and science school, whether it's the arts, and the new school that are coming on the health science school. Having those options in high school is important, but also having other options of those that may not be able to, if they're struggling in high school, in middle school, on through high school, they're looking for a way to make a decent living. And what this legislation that I see does for those young people is giving them a shot at life and being able to provide for their families early on because they're not going to a four-year institution. And so I support this legislation, support the effort. It may need a little work, but I support this 100% because it's creating an option for other families. And that's what we've been doing as a legislature, creating options.
That bill was approved and now goes to the full House. The House State Government Committee took up two bills aimed at addressing the idea of making Juneteenth an official state holiday. That's the day celebrating the official end of slavery on June 19, 1865. The question was whether to replace a current state holiday, specifically Jefferson Davis's birthday. In the end, members reached a compromise.
So my bill, HB 4, initially was to just, as it has been for the last few years, as well as others, to make Juneteenth a holiday for which state offices, of course, will be closed as designated by other holidays that have already been approved by the legislature. For that purpose, that A will name officially here in the state of Alabama Juneteenth as a holiday. We will not pick up another closed holiday, however, but what will happen is between the two holidays of Juneteenth and Jefferson Davis, Jefferson Davis, we will have, employees will have to choose between those two holidays, and they will be able to select which one of those 2 days they will take as a holiday. So they have an option between Juneteenth and Jefferson Davis Day in lieu of closing or adding another paid holiday, is my understanding. In an effort to try to reach a compromise, this is where we are today. So there will still be an added holiday, but no added day where the state will be closed.
On to the House Judiciary Committee, which took up House Bill 359 from Representative Russell Bedsole. It would allow probate judges to consider someone's substance abuse disorder along with mental illness when deciding involuntary commitments.
HB 359, issue number 1, mental health problems often coexist with substance abuse type issues. This will address the definition to include substance use or abuse that will help in the aid and treatment of those with mental health disorders. As we possibly have funding available that would help in that area, that this will help that funding be applicable to mental health issues in the future. This bill also defines co-occurring substance use disorder. It adds a definition to the serious mental health, or SMI. Issue number 2, the law requires a commitment petition to be filed in the county where the individual is located. The probate judge must, after that, order the sheriff of the county in which the individual is located to serve a copy of the petition. Sometimes these individuals will travel to another county before the order is issued to the sheriff, and because the probate judge does not have the authority to order another county sheriff to serve the individual the petition, service cannot be accomplished. This bill would clarify that the location of the individual at the time of the filing is what matters, not necessarily where he or she is subsequently located.
That bill was approved and now goes to the full House. The committee also debated legislation aimed at reforming Alabama's bail process. House Bill 16 from Representative Chris England would allow courts greater flexibility to accept cash bonds.
What the law currently says is that the total amount has to be posted, which it takes away the ability for judges to do a percentage bond, which could be a cash bond. Instead of requiring that defendant to go get a bondsman, the court can actually say you pay 10% cash and we can take that in instead. What normally happens in that situation is when you pay that cash bond, when the defendant shows, because generally speaking, they'll come up, they'll tell you they don't have any money until you lock them up, and then they say, oh, well, if you can give me 10% cash, that money magically appears. Once we get that money, when they don't show up again, we can forfeit it and use that money to pay for fines, costs, and restitution, which is what it's used for in courtrooms all across the state. So what this bill will do will restore the ability for judges' discretion to establish a percentage bond so they can do a percentage for cash bonds.
That bill was approved and also now goes to the full House. Today was AEA Retiree Day at the State House. More than 100 retired teachers and education workers came to the legislature to urge their lawmakers to fund the Education Retirees Trust Fund, or ERTF. The trust fund was created by statute back in 2021 for the purpose of setting aside money to help pay for cost of living increases for retired education workers. That includes teachers, administrative staff, bus drivers, cafeteria workers, and the like.
We're asking that they finally put some funding in that Education Retirees Trust Fund that they graciously provided to us a few years ago, but has remained empty. This is the largest crowd that we've ever had at any AEA event here at the State House, and I think it sends a sound message that our retirees haven't had any funding increases in 18 years, and that they're organized and they're ready to advocate for what they need to keep up with the pace of inflation.
And that's what happened at the State House today. I told you it was busy. We'll be right back with State Senator Andrew Jones. Stay with us.
You can watch past episodes of Capital Journal online at video.aptv.org. Capital Journal episodes are also available on APTV's free mobile app. You can also connect with Capital Journal and link to past episodes on Capital Journal's Facebook page. And you can listen to past episodes of Capital Journal when you're driving or on the go with Capital Journal podcasts. Keep up with what's happening with Capital Journal.
Welcome back to Capital Journal. Joining me next is State Senator Andrew Jones from Gadsden. Senator, thanks for coming on the show.
Good to be with you, Todd.
Well, I wanted to talk to you because it's Military Appreciation Week, I guess you'd say. It's Navy Week also, everything kind of happening at once. But we have these military-related bills moving through the legislature, the House and Senate, a couple of which you're sponsoring. Wanted to see, get an update on these bills. I know you had a couple on the floor yesterday. Talk about what kind of legislation y'all are moving and why it's important to tweak laws as it relates to military families.
Sure. We have a pretty big package of bills. Some are starting in the House. We've got others that are starting in the Senate, and several, I believe 4, passed out of the Senate this week. 2 that I were carrying, one was related to athletics. So military families that move to Alabama, can they get their student plugged in to high school sports immediately without some sort of transfer portal or waiting period? It's important, these families, they may be on a temporary orders, for a year or 2. If they're waiting a year to be eligible to play, that just costs valuable time in the child's athletic career. So we want to make sure that they're eligible to play and that they can come in here. And a lot of them, it's not the child's fault, not the parents' fault that they've got orders to come move. So we want to help them in any way we can. The other bill is one I'm very excited about. It deals with income tax exemption from state income tax for active duty guard and reserves. 30 states either have no income tax, have a full exemption for active duty military, or a partial exemption. So this brings National Guard and reserves into those ranks. And believe it or not, the fiscal note on that is not too big of a hit to the budget. It's about $2.1 million when it's fully implemented. But that money is going to mean a lot to those military families that are working here in the state.
Sure. Well, yeah, I grew up in Prattville, and so we had a lot of Maxwell and Gunner families moving in. And you're right, sometimes it's in the middle of the school year, and yeah, being on the sports team, the basketball team or the football team is really important, and some of those rules can get complicated. So it looks like the way you're going about it is saying, because how do you write a law? That does that to say, look, if you deny these athletes a chance to participate, then you can't be a part of the athletic association. Am I getting that right?
That's right. That was sort of how it was spelled out in the bill, and there was some language that was kind of tweaked and softened a little bit, but basically the gist of it is that. And so, the High School Athletic Association has been, to our understanding, working with military families. It's just there was no clear law that military folks could point to and say, hey, this is happening in Alabama. No clear information when they come here. What the status was going to be for their child. So we wanted something that was clear in law, can't be changed, that assures them, hey, when you come here, you're going to be eligible.
Mm-hmm. I think that's really interesting because you're talking about families, and there have been instances in recent years where, especially here in Montgomery, where, if it's a 2-year deployment or assignment station, they might not bring their families. They may leave them wherever they were coming from. So but we want to encourage families to be, to come to Alabama. So I think that's interesting. I know that y'all recently, you and some colleagues recently visited the Pentagon to talk about some of these issues. I guess we talked about it before your trip. How did that go?
Yeah, I was up there, I guess a couple weeks back when we had our first legislative work in district week. I went to meet with the Deputy Secretary of Defense for Military, Community, Family Policy, and State Liaison Office, if that's not a huge acronym. So
like to see that business card.
Oh yeah, it's quite a long title. But they were very pleased with the progress we've been making in Alabama. We were able to bring a couple things to put on their radar in terms of high school athletics, for example, that I just talked about. And kind of told them a lot of the good things we're doing here, some of what we're looking at working on, got their perspective on how we can best proceed. Alabama has really come a long way. We were not very well ranked a few years ago in terms of license reciprocity. I can explain that, and what we do for families and our rankings as it comes to our standing with the Pentagon in terms of family and community support. We've come a long way, and it's been said now that we're second to Florida in terms of military and veteran friendliness, and those are rankings that are put together based on things such as how easy is it for your spouse to get a job when a military member moves to Alabama, and what kind of another bill Senator Smitherman carried was related to juvenile jurisdiction on military bases. Another is related to special needs military dependents. So those kind of bills that may seem small in the whole scheme of things really help and support military families here in the state, and they help our rankings. And so if there's ever an unfortunate situation where a BRAC, where folks are looking at a military base closure somewhere in the United States, our rankings are going to be good, and we're going to help protect and defend our installations here in the state. They were also very pleased about the progress Alabama's made with the school choice legislation, because you can imagine military families will probably take advantage of some of those opportunities when they're moving to certain areas of the state, and so they were pleased to hear about that.
That's interesting. And yeah, you bring up BRAC, Base Realignment and Closure Commission. I talked with Senator Britt last week about the gamut of appropriations and all that kind of stuff, and she made the comment, it's not if, but when. And we probably do need another BRAC, and so doing the work of making sure our communities have all the support, the communities are giving our installations the support they need, so that when that happens, we at least have done everything we can to avoid a closure. And so I also asked her, certainly they're doing a lot on the congressional level, but does it make a difference? The legislature is passing these bills to every year to try to make it more military friendly. She said absolutely, and I've heard Congressman Rogers say the same thing. So I think it's like you said, it may seem small, but these things are very important to those families who are potentially moving to Alabama. Speaking of military and veterans issues, I know you had a bill dealing with trying to get more access to mental health for veterans. Where's that right now?
So Representative Chip Brown and I worked pretty much the entire spring break week. I think we had 4 or 5 Zoom meetings with all the stakeholders, the major stakeholders, which are the Department of Mental Health and the Department of Veterans Affairs for the state, bringing those folks together to talk about how we can have a program that's going to provide treatment, mental health services for veterans, better address those needs, have some pilot projects that are going to fund some specific treatment tailored toward veterans. One of the key things that I've learned through this process is that veterans respond better to a peer-to-peer type therapy situation where they have access to other veterans, because they may not be willing to talk about things to folks that don't understand what it's like to serve. I think I mentioned before that veterans face a higher risk of suicide and opioid addiction. The rate of drug addiction in veterans over a decade doubled nationwide.
Wow.
So a lot of issues there, but having that support that's tailored toward the specific needs and thoughts of veterans, tailored toward that peer-to-peer service is essential. So we are very close. We are ironing out a few technical details right now, but we have really come a long way into getting a product that I think all the stakeholders that are involved in this are going to be happy with. We look forward to having that bill probably next week, as soon as we can get the revisions spelled out in the bill.
Yep, sometimes it takes a lot of work to get that legislative process, but that's usually a good thing. Well, look, we're almost out of time, but you're the state senator from Gadsden, so I have to ask you, what did you think about the Beyonce shout out to your hometown? So she's got this new album out, and it's a country album, and she gives a shout out to Gadsden. Apparently, her dad grew up there.
Well, Gadsden's a great town, biggest part of my district, and anytime we get any attention that's a positive sort of thing for Gadsden, I love it. We've got a lot to offer there. The community's really coming together. We have a lot of exciting things happening in Gadsden, and I think it's great. Maybe we'll have some more folks show up and visit the Coosa River.
Absolutely. Well, if we can get Beyonce to come down, you got to let me know. We'll have her on the show, okay?
Well, hey, have a concert in Gadsden would be great.
That'd be great. All right. Well, thanks again for coming on the show.
Thank you, Todd. I appreciate you.
We'll be right back.
You can watch past episodes of Capitol Journal online anytime at Alabama Public Television's website, aptv.org.
That's our show for tonight. Thanks for watching. We'll be back tomorrow night at the same time with more coverage of the Alabama Legislature here on Alabama Public Television. For our Capitol Journal team, I'm Todd Stacy. We'll see you next time.